In this video series, I'm going to show how I use vscode productively with the help of vscode Neovim extension. But this is not going to be a series for people who have never used vscode Neovim extension. If you would like to learn more about this extension and to see how I configure it from scratch, there is a separate playlist that I have created previously, link to which I'm going to leave in the video description. Alright, first of all we need to have this vscode Neovim extension installed, as well as we have to install Neovim itself. And to check if Neovim is installed in your system, we can run the following command: nvim --version. And if there will be a version displayed, that means that Neovim is installed. By default, the path to the Neovim configuration file on macOS operating system is the following: root folder of the current user, followed by .config folder, followed by nvim folder. And inside of this folder there should be init.lo configuration file, and if it does not exist in here, you can create it manually. I'm gonna open up this file in VS Code, and as I've already said before, I'm not going to go through each configuration that I have in this file, since there is already another playlist where I go through each of these configurations in detail. Now I will only mention a couple of settings that I have in here. The first one is where I define so-called leader key. This is kind of a special key in Vim, which is used in most of the custom mappings. And I have defined space key as my leader key. Another setting that I have in here is this mapping, which allows me to quickly open up init.lo configuration file by pressing space C-O sequentially. Alright, so now let's jump to the bottom of this file. And the first thing that I will do in here is to create an if statement where I will check if Neovim is currently running from within VS Code. In such case, this if statement will be executed. And now let's define our first example keyboard shortcut. And we're doing so by calling method set on the keymap object, which takes a couple of arguments. The first argument will be the mode where this keyboard shortcut has to be active. The second argument is the sequence of keys that should trigger this keyboard shortcut. And as a third argument, we're specifying the function that has to be executed once this sequence of keys is pressed. Right here I'm gonna reach out to VS Code command, which is called editor.action.rename, which basically allows us to rename any symbols by placing the cursor on top of the particular symbol, for example constant or method name. And finally, I'm also going to provide one more argument into this function called, and that will be object with some configurations. We don't have to fully understand what each of those configurations mean in this object, since the same configuration object is going to be used for most of the keyboard shortcuts. Alright, so we have defined our first keyboard shortcut. For the normal mode, this N means normal mode in Vim. And the keyboard shortcut is this sequence of keys, by triggering which we're going to call this function, which is going to call VS Code command rename to rename a symbol under the cursor. Each command in VS Code has its own identifier, and to get this identifier we can simply open up keyboard shortcuts panel in VS Code, and in here we can see identifiers of commands, and this identifier I have just used in this mapping. Please note, every time we make changes to this init.lo configuration file, in order for these changes to take effect, we have to reload VS Code. So I'm gonna run reload VS Code command from within the command palette. This command palette can be opened by pressing Command-Shift-P on macOS or Ctrl-Shift-P on Windows. Alright, now I'm going to open up a file with a couple of constants, and let's try to rename some of them. For example, I will put my cursor on top of this constant and press space RE. As you can see, we got this dialog where we can rename this constant. Let's try it out once again. I'm gonna put my cursor on top of this now item type and press space RE. Then we can assign different name to this type and press enter. Alright, cool, as you can see it worked. Now I'm gonna get back to init.lo configuration file, and actually all keyboards shortcuts that we are going to define will have pretty much the same syntax as the first shortcut. There will be a lot of repetition, and so to avoid this repetition, I'm going to extract this configuration object into local variable right here. And down here, I'm gonna create the table called mappings, where I will gather all of the keyboard shortcuts. Each shortcut is going to include 3 elements, first of which will be the mode that we are defining this shortcut for. The second element will be the sequence of keys that is going to trigger this shortcut. And finally, the third element will be the vscode command identifier. Neovim configuration file uses Lua programming language, so we can write basic script to go over each element in this table. On each loop iteration, we're going to extract individual element from the object that is contained within mappings table, and we're going to receive mode, key, and command as a separate variables. We are basically doing some kind of a destructuring in here. And now I'm gonna use the same syntax that we have used before to define keyboard shortcut by simply calling method set, but in this case, we're going to forward those variables into this method called mode, key, the function that has to be executed when this keyboard shortcut is triggered. And right here, we're gonna have to pass command identifier into this vscode notify method call. And finally, let's not forget and also pass force argument, which will be the options object that we have defined earlier. And so in order to add new keyboard shortcut, we just have to add another entry to this mappings table. And this loop at the bottom is going to take care about defining new keyboard shortcut. Alright, as you know, in order to go to the beginning of the next word in Vim, we have to press W. And in order to go backward to the beginning of the previous word, we have to press B. But when we are dealing with snake case or camel case words, when pressing W or B, we jump over the whole word instead of jumping through subwords of the whole word. So I prefer to change the behavior of these motions so that I will be able to jump through parts of words that use camel case or snake case notations. And to do so, let's define a couple of overrides. So I'm saying that when pressing W in normal mode, we're going to execute cursor word part right command. And when pressing B in the normal mode, we will execute cursor word part left command. And after we reload window and try again, we can see that when pressing W, we're not jumping over the whole local storage keyword, but we are moving to the beginning of the next part of this whole word. And the same goes if we'll jump to the beginning of the previous subword, so to say. So to jump to the beginning of the next part of the word that uses camel case or snake case notation, we press W, and to jump to the beginning of the previous subword, we press B. And I also prefer to have the same behavior in visual mode. When we activate visual mode by pressing V, and then to highlight subwords separately, I prefer to press W. So let's get back to init.lua configuration file and define a couple more mappings in here. In this case, we're gonna define these mappings in visual mode, so I'm gonna use letter V. Keys will be the same, but the commands will be slightly different. I'm gonna append suffix select to each of these commands. And this will basically expand selection to subwords instead of just jumping over those subwords. I'll remind one more time that when we make changes to this configuration file, we have to reload vscode in order for these changes to take effect. And now let's try it out. If I'm going to activate visual mode by pressing V and then press W, this time, as you can see, selection expands up to the next subword of this whole word instead of expanding to the end of this word. And the same will be the case if we will move in the opposite direction by pressing B, which in this case removes selection from each subword of the whole word that uses camel case or snake case notations. We're going to continue defining other keyboard shortcuts in the upcoming lessons. Link to the repository with this init.lua configuration file will be in the video description. Next, we're going to define several keyboard shortcuts that will help us navigate through the code. And the first of which will be leader GD. In my case, it is space GD, and I'm going to bind these shortcuts to the reveal definition command. Basically, it will help us quickly navigate to the particular symbol to its definition. Let's say I'm going to put my cursor on top of the function call, and if I need to jump to the definition of this function, I'll just press space GD. And right away we're navigated to the file where this function has been defined. Let's try it out one more time. I'm gonna press space GD. By the way, VS Code Neovim extension already provides us with some set of default keyboard shortcuts. All of them can be found on the GitHub page of the extension under the key bindings section. And right here, as you can see, there is a keyboard shortcut GD, which does exactly this, navigates user to the definition of the particular symbol. So feel free to use these default shortcuts and also define additional ones. And we are moving on. Let's duplicate this line a couple more times. I'm going to define shortcuts to jump to the type definition. The command identifier will be editor action go to type definition, and another shortcut will be used to jump to the implementation. For going to type definition, I'm gonna press space GY sequence of keys, and for opening up implementation, I'm gonna use space GI. And I will remind you that every time that we modify this init.log configuration file, we have to restart VS Code in order for changes to take effect. Now let's try it out. I'm gonna put my cursor on this timeline item type and press space GY. I'm about to be redirected to the definition of this type. And one more time, let's jump to the definition of the activity type. I'm gonna press space GY, and we are here. And as for another shortcut to go to implementation, I will put my cursor on top of this function call, and I'll press space GI, and we are navigated to the definition of this function. So as you can see, this shortcut is pretty similar to the very first one that we have defined in this lesson. Another shortcut that might often come in handy will be to list all the references of the particular symbol under the cursor. I'm going to use space GR to see the list of references. And the way it works is the following. Firstly, we have to position our cursor on top of the particular symbol, constant or function, let's say, and then if I'll press space GR, we'll see such inline window with the list of all those places where this particular symbol is used. We can navigate through this list and jump to any place from here by pressing enter. Alright, let's add a couple more shortcuts. Space GS will be used to open up a window to jump to a particular symbol in the current file. The command name will be goto symbol, and the other shortcut will be used to jump to the particular line. And yes, it's very easy to jump to a particular line when you already use Vim, but nevertheless, I'm going to show this shortcut as well. And by the way, I try to choose such sequence of keys for the commands that most of the times will serve as abbreviations. For example, space GL in this case is a shorthand for go to line words. So now I'll switch over to the TypeScript file, and right here let's press space GS. We got such a window with a list of the symbols used in this file, and we can navigate through the list, press enter and navigate to a particular symbol. And it works not only with TypeScript or JavaScript files, but also for specific files such as Vue components or any other framework files. As long as there is a VS Code extension for that particular framework to make the VS Code recognize files of this framework. In my case, I had to install Vue official extension, and this way VS Code will be able to parse and analyze syntax of Vue components, and all those shortcuts, such as going to a particular definition or opening up a list of references of a particular symbol, will work. Let's keep going and try another shortcut. For going to a particular line, I'll press space GL, specify the line number and press enter, and we have jumped to this particular line. But anyway, Vim has a shortcut to go to a particular line out of the box. The next shortcuts are going to allow us to navigate backward and forward in the history of our jumps. I'm gonna use space NF to navigate forward in the history of jumps, and space NB to navigate backward. And the way it works is the following. To demonstrate this, I will open up a couple of additional files, activities.ts, constants.ts, and main.ts. So we have some kind of a history of our jumps already, and we can use shortcuts space and B to navigate back in the history to all those previous cursor positions in different files where we were before. And in the same way, we can navigate forward through the history of jumps by pressing space and F. As you can see, it works. And finally, the last shortcut that I'm going to add in this lesson will be used to jump to the last edit location. So I will use space GE for this action. The command identifier will be navigate to last edit location. Let's make one modification to this file, and then I'm going to jump away from this place. And then if I need to jump to the last location where I have modified the code, I'll press space J E. And right away my cursor gets moved to this particular position. Let's try it out one more time. Firstly, I'll make modification, navigate away, and press space J E. And I'm right here at the place of my last modification. As always, link to the repository with this configuration file will be in the video description. To be able to search for symbols globally throughout the whole project, I'm going to use space SS shortcut. The command name is show all symbols. And what it's going to allow us to do is to open up such window, and from here we can choose any constant, function, method definition, and navigate to this place where it's defined. So it's in some way similar to one command that we have previously reviewed that allows us to search for a symbol within one particular file. Next one, I'm going to define keyboard shortcut to open up command palette. Even though we already have default keyboard shortcut to open up command palette in VS Code, which is Command Shift P on macOS or Ctrl Shift P on Windows. But if you prefer Vim style shortcut, you can define it as well. So if I'll press space SA, I'm going to open up command palette. Another very common feature of VS Code is opening up palette with all the files and folders. I'm going to use space SF to open up quick search for files or folders. By default, VS Code uses Command P on macOS or Ctrl P on Windows to open up this palette. So in addition to that, we can also press space SF and we'll get the same window with list of files. Now I'm going to add a couple more shortcuts that will let us open up inline editor, where we'll be able to see definition of a particular symbol, function definition, method definition, and so on. So space VD is going to be responsible for opening up inline editor with definition. Space VI will show the same inline editor with an implementation, for example, implementation of an abstract method. And finally, one more shortcut, which is space VT, will open up the same inline editor with the definition of the particular type on which we had our cursor before pressing this shortcut. Alright, now let's try it out. I'm going to switch over to view component, and let's say I want to quickly check definition of the timeline our component. So instead of opening up file with this component definition, I can press space VD. And there we go, we get additional window where we can see implementation of this component. Let's try it out one more time. I'm gonna press space VD and we get this editor. Of course, it is possible to also use it with types. So if I'll put my cursor on top of the type and press space VT, I'll get the same inline editor with type definition. Now let's try one more shortcut to see definition of the function. Let's put the cursor on this function reset timeline item activities and press space VI. And right away we're seeing the definition of this function without having to open up new tab with this file. Next, sometimes it's very useful to see quick documentation for the particular symbol. And I'm going to define keyboard shortcut, which will be space VH, which will show that hover with some additional information of the particular symbol. It's kind of like floating documentation, so if I'll put my cursor on any element and press space VH, we're going to see such floating window. And it works with almost every symbol. Next one, if we'd like to see where that particular symbol is used throughout the whole code base, I'm gonna add the following shortcut, space FR, which is going to show the list of all the places where the particular symbol is referenced. Now if I'm gonna press space FR, right away we get this side panel with the list of all those files where generate activity select options function is used. And we can navigate through this list and press enter to jump into the particular place. And finally, let's add one more shortcut in this lesson, which will be pretty similar to the previous one. It will also show list of places where particular symbol is used, but instead of opening up side panel, it will let us see all usages in line. I'm gonna use space SR, and the command name in this case is reference search.trigger. So let me put my cursor on top of some function, for example, stop timeline item timer, and we're seeing such inline editor with a list of places where this particular function is being called or defined. In other words, where this particular function name is referenced. Let's try it out one more time. I'm gonna press space SR, and we got inline editor with list of references. Link to the repository with this configuration file will be in the video description. In this lesson, let's add the next set of keyboard shortcuts, which will be primarily used for finding, replacing, and refactoring features. In VS Code, we can easily open up search panel by pressing Command F on macOS or Ctrl F on Windows. But in addition to that, I'm also going to add this Vim style keyboard shortcut to open up search panel, which will be space FF. If I'll press space FF, we get this panel where we can search, press enter, and navigate to the place where this particular text is used. We can also open up the same panel, but with additional replace field if you'd like to do search and replace. And to open up this panel with a replace field, I'm gonna use space FR. The command identifier will be start find replace action. Let's try it out. I'm gonna press space FR. In the first field, we have to type in the text that we need to replace. And in the second field, I'm gonna type in the text that we have to replace the found text with. And after pressing enter, the replacement will be made. Let's discard these changes and get back to init.lua configuration file. The next couple of shortcuts will be responsible for global search and replace. The first one will open up search panel to find something globally. The command identifier will be finding files, and I'm going to use space FG keyboard shortcut for it. And if I need to replace something globally, I'm gonna use space RG. So to open up panel of the global search, I'm gonna press space FG. We get this side panel where all places with search matches will be listed throughout the whole project. And in the same way, we can press space RG to get the same search window with additional replace field. And we can do search and replace globally. Moving on, the next shortcut will be used to rename some symbol. I'm gonna use space RE, which stands for rename. The identifier of the command is also rename. And now I'm gonna put my cursor on any symbol that I like to rename. Press space RE. Here we are specifying the new name for this symbol. Press enter, and there we go. It was renamed. Sometimes we need to do some modifications to a particular place, and we can use refactor panel in VS Code. And to open up this refactor panel, I'm going to use space RF shortcut. Let's see it in action. If we'll put our cursor on any element, press space RF, we get this window with a couple of options. They depend on which particular symbol we have called this command on. For example, if I'm going to open up this refactor panel while being on this import statement, in here I'm going to see different list of options. Let's press enter, and this refactor has been made. I'm gonna discard this change and get back to configuration file. Let's add another shortcut. And this one will be used to apply quick fixes. The shortcut will be space QF. And to demonstrate this shortcut, I'm going to make an error in this file. And now let's try to open up Quick Fix panel, I'll press space QF. Here we are presented with the Quick Fix option. Let's choose one of the available options. As for how we can fix this part of code, press Enter, and there we go, VS Code has applied the fix for us. And finally, last shortcut in this lesson will be used to open up Auto Suggestions window. I'm gonna use space SG to open up the list with suggestions. Let's specify trigger suggest comment identifier and try this shortcut in action. So for example, if I need to open up autocomplete window as I'm typing, since this autocomplete window does not appear for me automatically, I have disabled this behavior. So if I need to see this autocomplete window, I'm gonna press space SG and choose one of the available options. And as you may have guessed, this one is also contextual, and depending on where we're gonna open up this suggestions window, the list of suggestions will be of course different. And of course it also depends on the part of the text that we like to autocomplete. And that is it for this lesson. In the next one we're going to move to another set of keyboard shortcuts. Now let's add keyboard shortcuts that will help us manipulate lines and apply formatting. Sometimes we need to quickly copy the current line, and to do so I'm gonna use space LU shortcuts that will basically copy the current line and put it on top of the existing one. Another one will be leader LD, that is basically the same, but the copied line will appear at the bottom of the current one. So if we'll try it out and press space LU, the current line gets copied and the copy is added on top. In the same way, if we're gonna press space LD, the copy line will be added to the bottom of the current one. And if we don't need to copy the line but basically move it up or down, we can also assign a couple of shortcuts. To move the current line up, I'm going to use space MU shortcut, and to move the current line down, I will press space MD. So firstly, let's try to move the current line up by pressing space MU. As you can see, it works. And if I'll press space MD, we're gonna see how the current line gets moved down. And I guess one of the most used action while writing code is apply formatting. And to apply formatting, I'm gonna press space FM, which stands for formatting. The comment identifier is format document. So now anytime if I need to apply formatting to the current file, I can just press space FM. As you can see, it's working perfectly. Another command which is also similar to formatting, and this one allows us to reorganize imports, basically reorder imports following some rules. I will use space OI, which stands for organize imports. So now if I'll change order of these imports and then press space OI, we're seeing how those imports were sorted. Let's jump into another file and also change order in here. After pressing space OI, those imports will be sorted. And finally, to be able to jump between all existing errors within one file, I'm gonna define two shortcuts that will help me to quickly jump to the next error in the file and the previous one. Space EN will be used to go to the next error, and space EP, which stands for error previous, is gonna help me navigate to the previous error. And to demonstrate this feature, firstly, I'm going to make some errors within this file to have something to work with. And now if I need to quickly go to the next error, I'm gonna press space EN, and to navigate to the previous error, I'm gonna press space EP. And this way we can easily navigate through the errors in particular file. Link to the repository with this configuration file will be as always in the video description. Now when it comes to file and workspace management, we can also define a few keyboard shortcuts that will help us manage files. So to copy the path to the current file, I'm going to use space CP shortcut, and this is going to quickly copy the absolute path to this file, starting from the root of the operating system. And if I need to copy a path to the currently open file, starting from the project root, I'm going to use space CR shortcut. So if I will try and press space CP, it seems like nothing has happened, but if we'll try to paste whatever is currently in the buffer, we'll get the absolute path to this file starting from the root of the operating system. And in the same way, if I'll press space CR, we will get the path to the same file starting from the project root. Next one, to be able to quickly jump between recently open projects in VS Code, I'm gonna use space RL shortcut. And after pressing this shortcut, we're gonna get such window with a list of recently open projects, and we can open up each of them by just pressing enter. By default, to create an empty file on macOS, we can press Command N. In addition to this, I'm also going to define Vim style shortcut to create new file, which will be space NF. Before moving on to another shortcut, let's just try it out and press space NF and make sure that the new file will be created. As you can see, it was. Now, I'll add a couple more shortcuts, which will be used to close currently open file or to close all open files at once. So to close currently open file, I'm gonna use space CF, which stands for close file, and to close all files at once, I'm gonna use space FA. Firstly, let's try and close the current file by pressing space CF. It worked. And now if I'm gonna press space FA, I'm about to see that all files have been closed. It worked. Moving on, sometimes there may be a need to open any file in operating system, and to open up the window where we can select any file, we can use shortcut. In my case, it will be space OF. And after pressing this shortcut, we're gonna get operating system file picker, such as this one. And from here we can choose and open any file. Another shortcut that sometimes might come in handy is used to reload VS Code. For example, in our case, anytime we modify this file, we have to reload VS Code. So to quickly reload VS Code, I'm gonna use space RW, which stands for reload window. So after pressing this shortcut, VS Code will be reloaded instantly, and you might not even notice that it has been reloaded. So it's basically calling the same reload window command that we can execute from within command palette, like this. I'm also going to add the following shortcut, which will help me quickly open up VS Code settings.json configuration file. And whenever I need to quickly open up my VS Code configuration file, all I have to do is press space OS. And there we go, settings.json has been opened. That's about it for this lesson. Let's continue defining keyboard shortcuts in the next one. In this final lesson of the series, I'm going to define several keyboard shortcuts related to working with multiple splits. Basically, VS Code allows us to work with several files simultaneously on the same tab. And to be able to create vertical split, I'm going to use space WV shortcut. To create horizontal split, I'm gonna use space WH. In the first case, WV stands for window vertical, and WH stands for window horizontal. Then, if we already have several splits created, in order to combine some of them, I'm going to use space WW shortcut. And eventually, to reset sizes of all splits, I'm gonna use space WA shortcut. And as for navigation between several splits, I have separately defined keyboard shortcuts directly in keybindings.json VS Code file. And in here, to navigate to the left split, I have to press Ctrl J. To navigate to the bottom split, I will press Ctrl K. To navigate to the right split, I will press Ctrl semicolon. And finally, to navigate to upper split, I'm gonna have to press Ctrl L. And now let's take a look at the example. So for example, I need to split this working area on few splits and create one to the right. And to do so, I'm gonna press space WV, which stands for window vertical. As you can see, the split was created. And now if I need to create one split at the bottom, I'm gonna press space WH, which stands for window horizontal. And of course, we can open up different files in each of those splits. So now if, let's say, I want to remove some splits, for example, combine my current one with the next one, I'm going to press space WW. And it is going to combine my current active split where the cursor is positioned at with the next one. And in the same way I can keep pressing this shortcut space WW to eventually get only one split. And finally, the last shortcut that we have defined and we haven't tried yet is to reset the widths and heights of each split back to its original size. But before that, let me just resize some splits to have different widths. We can do so by executing increase editor widths command from within command palette. And now that we have different sizes of some splits, to reset all the sizes back to its original size, I'm going to press space WA. And there we go, now we are back to the original sizes of all splits. And with that we are finished defining keyboard shortcuts. Now I'm gonna go back to init.lua configuration file and add some comments in front of every set of keyboard shortcuts that can be logically grouped. For example, the first 4 shortcuts are responsible for navigating between words. I'll specify it in here. Moving on to the next group. This group is mainly used for code navigation. The next set of keyboard shortcuts are mainly responsible for quick search and pick actions. The next shortcuts are used for finding, replacing, and refactoring actions. The next group is responsible for line editing and code maintenance in general, applying formatting, organizing imports, and so on. Moving on to the next group, this one is mainly used for file and workspace management. And finally, the last set of shortcuts that we have defined in this lesson is responsible for working with multiple windows or splits. And with that, we are finishing this series. Link to the repository with the final init.lua configuration file will be available in the video description.